Good morning. Oh, so there's a whole lot of people over in the other side that ought to get themselves over here so you don't miss Paul, Muller, and Drew Rivers. So everybody over in the main hall over there and running around, come back over to the Baggett Theater. You might want to make announcements. So I first met Paul and Drew at the second gathering of the Ecological Farming Association. And it was pretty cute. I saw them and I noticed that they were sort of shyly talking to each other earlier in the day, and then at our very first contra dance celebration of getting together as organic farmers, they were madly and wildly cavorting all over the room with sparks flying. And I soon discovered that Paul had only one mode of dancing, which is madly and wildly cavorting. And Drew was one of the few women that could keep up with this guy. So the rest is history. Well, these two people are my heroes. Our friendship has become very dear. We've had almost 40 years of working alongside each other to build the organic farming movement. And they have just been so charismatic, so open, so available, and so involved in helping boost us up and sharing and moving it all along. Paul came from a large farming family near Woodland, and I remember him telling me that his brothers thought his organic farming notions were pretty crazy. But I bet they see things really differently now, if you were to ask them. And then Drew, she came from Vermont, and in her high school years knew she wanted to be part of this back to the land movement that was growing like wildfire all across our nation. So he and Drew began leasing farmland around Woodland and eventually into the Capay Valley. And they sold to some of the first Bay Area farmers markets. They were one of the first farms to introduce the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, which are subscription boxes. And then they joined forces with their farming partner and political activist, Judith Redmond, who is amazing in her own right of all that she's done. Another story. So in 1989, they purchased an old dairy farm, 100 acres, with a rundown farmhouse and barn in the Capay Valley. And for those of you who don't know where the Capay Valley is, it's west of the Sacramento Valley, and it's a little bit behind some small hills. And so it's separated from the Sacramento Valley, and it's its own special little place. And Paul and Drew pioneered it, and then many, many organic farmers have followed suit. So it's a very special place. So this became home to Full Belly Farm. And today, every building has been renovated, many new ones built. The barn is covered with solar panels. They built a state-of-the-art straw bale house. And it now consists of 425 acres, employing some 80 full-time employees, plus interns and seasonal employees. They provide fruit, vegetables, nuts, meat, eggs, flowers, and processed foods like almond butter, pomegranate syrup and jam, wool yarn, and sheepskins. This got a little wet. To the same three markets that they began selling to in the early 90s. They have 1,100 CSA customers and wholesale and restaurant accounts. And both Drew and Paul have been incredibly active and involved in educating the public and working towards policy change. Drew started working with students, bringing students to the farm, and I'm sure has had thousands now of students come through that farm for educational days and for camping during the summer. They've also served on several boards: CAF, Community Alliance of Family Farms, the Marin Farmers Market, the Ecological Farming Association, and the YOLO Land Trust, just to name a few. They've hosted the Hosedown Harvest Festival for 35 years. It's an amazing family celebration, and if you have not ever been, I hope you get a chance to. They'll have to tell us what's going on with that right now. But I can't describe it because it would just take me too long to describe all its wonders. All 4 of their adult children have returned to the farm, which is really saying something. And each one has found their way to add their own creative additions to this teeming, vibrant farming scene. When asked about their tips to success, Drew said that it was partly luck and partly being in the right place at the right time. And Paul said, back at our beginnings, there was a lot of determination. We were part of an evolving consciousness. And I want to say that we and they are all still part of an evolving consciousness. So here's a couple of rock stars of the organic food movement, Drew Rivers and Paul Muller.
Thank you so much, Kalita.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us here. We're actually very humbled that we got invited. We come here and we think, wow, this is a pretty happening place. Nevada City, so beautiful, and all these cool things happening. So we're going to give you our little tips of 3.5 decades of farming, and really appreciate that you're here to hear what we have to say. Yeah, we're from Full Valley Farm, and our farm is located in the Capay Valley at the top end, a little town called Gwynda. Beautiful little valley where we can be growing things 365 days of the year, very Mediterranean climate. It's really been the most beautiful and serendipitous journey that we've had. And so we kind of wanted to give you, as getting gray and a little older, thinking we might have a few tips of wisdom for you as aspiring farmers and also maybe just gardeners. Some things that we've learned over the past 35 years. And we kind of distilled this down into 5 things, which, you know, come on, we probably have 105 really little lessons that we'd like to give, but these are kind of things that after this long on the journey that we feel like we could share some of the things that we feel are really important to the success of our farm and hopefully to the success of your farms as well. The first one that I wanted to talk about was finding your people. And I think that we could stand up here all day and tell you how to prune trees or birth a baby lamb or pick broccoli or sell at the farmer's market. But what it really comes down to, in my opinion, after these many years, is the people that we work with and the love and the care that we give to each other is really what creates the farm. And so I just would like to suggest to you how important that is, that you develop these relationships with people that you're going to farm with, because that's what's really going to make you happy. You can grow 100 acres of whatever you want, but the people that are around you to help take care of you and support you are really what is at the core of all of us, really. And so we found each other, and I added in this slide to show you that we've come a long way. This was actually the day before we got married, and I was 3 months pregnant. So we didn't follow rules even back then. But we were just this young couple, and we really didn't know a whole lot about farming. I had gone to UC Davis, grew up in Vermont, as Kalita said, went to UC Davis and got a job as a farm manager on one of the campus farms. And Paul had grown up on a dairy farm in downtown San Jose. The last dairy farm to really be in that area. And we met sort of circuitously, as Kalita said, at a farm conference, and he was a good dancer, and that was the end of that. So about a year later, we got married. It was definitely a shotgun wedding, and so this was where we were at the very beginning. This is in 1983. And yet this picture to me speaks a million words, because we were so passionate about farming, probably even more than about each other. And we just really had this commitment to we had this commitment to farm, and right off the bat, even as we were writing our vows, we said, we want to farm full time. We don't want to have to work off farm. It was so important to us that we were together, especially if we were going to raise family. So this was the beginning. At this point, we actually moved to the Capay Valley and rented our current farm from a landowner who lived in the Bay Area. And this started happening. We were growing about 60 acres of vegetables, and this is out in a melon field, and our first baby, and then more of them came. I don't know how, or it just seemed to happen, and we were still farming as a single family couple with 3 little kids, and it was really hard. We were farming, we were working 16-hour days. We would put the kids to bed and go back out and bunch kale or bunch flowers in the shop. And it was also at this time that our farm came up for sale. And we really had to do some serious thinking about how do we think outside the box here. We were, looking at farms all over the country that were like us, single family farms trying to farm together, going out of business, committing suicide. It was a really abysmal rate of loss of farmers in this country. And so how could we do this and stay successful? And as we pondered that question, and our land was coming up for sale that we had worked so hard on for the last 5 or 6 years, we decided that really the way to do it was to become partners and think outside of that box of just trying to do it on our own. And this is a picture of our current partnership that has lasted for 30 years. And it was one of the best decisions that we made to be able to remain full-time farmers and continue on our path that we really felt was so important of growing food for lots of people. So Judith on the left was our first partner. She and her husband joined us to buy our property together, and she brought to the table so much wisdom and help in areas that Paul and I maybe weren't necessarily that good at. And Andrew joined us about 5 years later. He actually started as an apprentice at our farm, And we just loved working with him. And so he joined us in 1995. And so our community had grown. We were now 4 people strong, which meant that we could take a few days off here and there. We could actually take our kids to, to the zoo if we wanted to, or, do things that were not completely 150% farming. And that really is truly a bottom line success of our farm, that we became a community rather than just a single family farm. I have no doubt that the 2 people on the right would not still be together if we had not joined the 2 people on the left. So we really are so grateful and forever happy that we did that. So as our farm evolved, and I'm talking about our community now, our people that are so important to our farm, our kids grew up to be amazing and went away to college, and I think it was just the good food that they had enjoyed at home, but they all decided to come back and work with us. So these are our 4 kids, Hallie, Rye, Ammon, and Hannah, and their spouses. And they are all working with us, and it's so amazing to have that second generation. We love the new energy that's come back to the farm. People get old, and having that renewed energy is so vital for a farm to keep going. And they have each taken on new roles and brought new ideas to the farm. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it has been really critical and so important to the success of our farm to have this new generation bringing back ideas that we had never thought about. And this is then our community even bigger. This is Andrew and Judith's, Andrew and Anna's children. And so this is kind of the core group of sort of ownership and real dedication to the farm. This is our people, our peeps. You gotta find them. So, but of course, we do not do 400 acres just even with that group. And so this is really our people. These are the people that make our farm run. This is our full-time, year-round crew. We became very dedicated at the beginning. We started with about 5 or 6 crew members, and it has grown to now be about 80 full-time people. And we are so committed to year-round labor for them, so committed to having them eat our food, be a really big part of our lives. And some of them, Antonio and Bonifacio, have worked with us for like 30 years. And so we've been able to help them purchase property near us. A lot of them live near us in the Cape Valley with the help of loans from the farm to purchase their own housing. We have so much gratitude for the handwork that it takes to run a farm like ours. And this is our people. And I just can't say enough about the work and dedication. Our farm is run almost entirely by the hands of our crew. We harvest almost everything by hand, except for some grains and a few other things, but all of our vegetables and fruit are harvested with hands. And it takes a lot of them, and we're just eternally grateful. I just want to say that having these people in our lives, and now as we get older, thinking about them taking care of us, and that responsibility as we grow into the older age is just like such a comfort. And so finding those people in your life is really important. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul for our number 2 tip of wisdom.
Well, you know, when you get started in thinking about how you can do something like this, you realize that Drew has some things that perspective on this, and I have a perspective on this, and it's always fun to hear what she has to say. And we'll get into explaining a little later on today. I'll talk to her about how babies come and things, and because she knows, but I don't know if she does. So and this, you know, so finding. I think for all you guys out there, finding a very hard-headed woman who is driven and hanging on is a real important piece of all this. So there is, you know, there's a lot to say. And in thinking about this talk, part of me said, boy, what will I say for 15, 20 minutes that'll be important? And how do I bridge all the pieces here? Beginning farmers who've been doing it for a while, farmers who want to figure out how they do things a little better, farmers that want to integrate and incorporate some of the new ideas that are coming around. We're an evolving farm. We're not a done product. We're still trying to figure out how we incorporate more life in the whole system, how we begin to think about diversity in all its dimensions. I mean, we can talk about being connected through time to history, to the ancestors who were on this land. We can talk about how we connected to all the efforts and the knowledge that came before us, and how we built our ideas about agriculture on that knowledge. We can talk about where we are now and all the different manifestations of how you think about a farm and build the farm around those ideas, and then how you have one moment in April when you can take that idea that you had and everything's right, and you're either going to put it into practice or you're going to try it the next year. I mean, you are on a continuum of time, you're on a continuum of practice, you're on this continuum of experience that you're applying to the place that you have. So some of the things that I think bridge all of us together are some principles. The methods that you apply those principles with depend upon your own experience and your own place and your own capacity. We grew this farm because I grew up in agriculture that was American agriculture was losing 2,000 farm families a week. It was the 60s, 70s, and 80s for younger people who don't know it. It was a deconstruction of all the things I think we're trying to rebuild. I think we're trying to put the pieces back in place and make something healthy that's a healthy food system, a healthy community, a healthy relationship of all of us together. And it's important to remember and think about, we can't do it by building the same system that failed, because the road is so much higher. The journey is so much greater. Those were people who owned their land, who owned the implements to make agriculture work, who owned all the pieces there, but they failed because the economic system, the political system, the market structure didn't support them. So if we want to make an agriculture that's resilient and different, we have to build it on different principles and different types of connectivity of all the people in this room. That's going to be critical. So organic agriculture got it right initially. It said diversity is key. And diversity is about the interconnection of all these communities. It's the communities of people who are buying your product. It's the communities of families on a farm. It's the communities of soil ecology, this larger water cycle, the farming community that you're all related to. It's the community of how you relate to your consumers, and all that connectivity is all about diversity. And diversity and beauty go hand in hand. What we're going to create in thinking about a new food system is a system where beauty is seductive and brings people in. And where taste is related to what you're doing on your land. Flavor is something that can be sensed, appreciated, and brought in to each individual human being. And where through that process of consumption, consuming and tasting and enjoying what you're producing, they're connected, whether they know it or not, microbial life in your soil is on your plant surface, the leaf surface. You can try and scrub it off, but it's going to stay there, and that goes into your gut. So you're making this connection, an intimate connection between what's in the ground, what you're doing there, and what's the consumer ends up taking in, and then it's informing them, whether they know it or not. And as we go along here, we're going to discover that diversity as a principle is really what connects these vibrant communities together, okay? Let's see if I can do this. Oops. We learned how to farm based on farming systems that came before us. I grew up on a farm. We started row crop farming, a dairy farm. We tried to apply the principles of things we saw around us. We have a lot of naked soil, okay? Someone just said the other day, Mother Nature is an elegant woman. She doesn't like to be unclothed. And the clothing in nature, if you look at natural systems, the clothing is covering for the soil. We learned how to farm this way. We are now continuing to learn how to change our practices. This works. This is better. What we've been doing over time is better than what conventional systems have done because we're adding cover crops. We're looking at biodiversity in the system. We're looking at diversity in our soil. We're looking for a whole ecological whole that you're creating on your farm. It's better, but it's still not good enough. So part of this idea of diversity, as diversity, we intuit that diversity is really important to all of us. When you see flowers, you're connected visually, mentally, spiritually, in these other places in your life to what you see there. But you're not the only one. Flowers seduce bees. You know, Michael Pollan said that flowers seduce us to grow them. It's their trick. To make seed, they make a beautiful bloom so that we can grab that bloom and we want to see it on our farm. I think that seduction is part of an ecological whole. All of our farms, it's something you can do this year is make the edges more beautiful. Make it more attractive so the person coming down the road, make your garden more beautiful, has other things they're looking at and say, my God, that's an organic farm. That farm, somehow, it's just more vibrant, more beautiful. And when you create this, you realize life comes to this, okay? And something that is noticeably different on our farm. And if you can come in the summertime, when it's warm, you can hear a hum of life. You can hear bees and insects and other things out there, and you'll see it in your farm. If you have flowers and blooms, pollen and nectar, if you're feeding that cycle of life, that diversity, it'll come to your farm. You don't have to invite it in. It will come there. And it's there waiting for us to invite it in. I was thinking as we were hearing from a Native American person who had been here as part of a long lineage of history, is that our ancestors have been waiting, all those ancestors have been waiting for you all. They've been waiting for you to come because we've gone through a period here. And we need now to think about how we change that paradigm. And you are the ones that our ancestors have been waiting to come. You are designing this new system. And beyond you, the people, the children and their ancestors, their predecessors, children, offspring, will thank you for being here. So it's a continuum of time where we're operating. So beauty is one of the pieces that will redefine our agriculture. If you grow trees, grow more edges where there's flowers. Look for flowering plants. Diversify your system. Create more places where life can be there. Put more layers of life on your farm in all the dimensions. Create new products. Try new things all the time. Be creative. Make your place a creative place. Drew talked about finding your people. Our kids wouldn't be on our farm if we didn't say, what do you want to do? What interests you? What piques your interest? How can we connect you to the whole? You know, what dimension can you add here? So they're adding dimensions to our farm by our allowing those dimensions to be there. Farming needs to be creative, and we need to, Wes Jackson said, we are the jumper cables, we are the battery, and the jumper cables will be meetings like this where conventional growers will get what they need because the energy is going to come from you to an agriculture that needs a tremendous amount of vision and energy. And that's part of our mission, is to educate and bring people to our farm so we can say this can be done. We probably would be happier on a much smaller farm, I think. I don't know, I have to check with her. But I think part of our mission was that we wanted to make an example of how agriculture can be done on a scale that challenges a lot of the assumptions that are part of what farmers know right now. So creativity, creating a visual diversity. The farmers market display can be incredibly diverse. That attracts people to the display. Diversity in all of its dimensions is critically important. First part of one of the first things Judith wanted to do on the farm is she planted hedgerows throughout the farm. You can create ecological diversity, and that brings life in. We find out with our studies with UC Davis on bees that you need places that are undisturbed for your bumblebees to live. Bumblebees don't like disturbed soil. They live 2 feet down in the ground. If you don't have those edges incorporated into what you're doing, you won't see that layer of life there. So you're creating a space for that life to show up and actually show you that it's there. Bumblebees aren't essential for tomato plants. Tomato plants don't need pollination, but if a bumblebee visits a tomato flower, you're likely to have a much larger tomato. So they help in that process. They're not essential, but they're a helper in that process. More layers of life. So we've integrated livestock. This discussion about livestock is really difficult because if you have a 3-acre farm, you say, well, how do I put livestock into that system? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you have a livestock grazer who visits your farm, brings their animals in, and they do the livestock grazing for you. Think as a community. Think more holistically about how you can build with one another some of the principles of diversity that you may want to have in your system and how you get them in there. We have livestock in there. What I love about livestock is that when we have beneficial insects out here on those flowers and in that system, in a multi-storied cover crop, they're moving into that system and they're munching it down pretty damn slowly. It's not like a flail mower. It's not like one step of turning that over for the next crop, but they're moving things on. They're saying, it's time for you to move on. Time for me to move on too. So diversity, flowers, and this is where we are right now. So we've learned how to keep things clean, how to cultivate, how to manage our weeds. We can grow really good crops, but we're not there yet. We still haven't figured out how to tie soil fungal life into the whole because we till too much. So the principles that we're learning and that we're going to next, we'll talk about, I'll get out of here, is that we're trying to create more life down deep, because I think what we'll discover, and what Donegal showed in that picture of the California oatgrass, is that the carbon that we need to pull out of the atmosphere, and that we're part of a solution, figuring out a solution, the deeper you put it in the soil with those root systems and the complexity of those microorganisms that are living on those root systems, they'll store that carbon down deeper. The deeper it's stored, the less likely it is to be volatilized when you do this tilling. Tilling is not where we want to be. So we're part of a conservation innovation grant that we've got acreage set aside where we're going to figure out how we grow vegetables without tilling. That's our next journey, and how we get more carbon stored deep in the ground as part of our vegetable production system. Okay, and then economic diversity. You want to talk about that? Economic diversity, so just briefly, you've got to think about your markets more. We sell about 15% to a CSA, 15% to farmers markets, 15% or 20% to restaurants and stores, and the rest goes wholesale. So we've thought about if one of those pieces falls off and you lose the one wholesaler who bought, or the whole food store that used to buy through the back door that now doesn't allow you to go through the back door, one thing changes, your whole structure begins to be challenged. So you have to have enough diversity in your marketing to reach people. Again, you're inoculating all those markets with what you do, and you should be proud of it, and it should be part of the whole that you're trying to create. So whole farm thinking, make it seductive. It's seductive. Seduction, make it fun, beautiful, and creative. Utilize what I'll call indigenous assets. So capture as much sunlight as you can. That's the energy in the system. And you do that with living plants. Photosynthesis is a process of taking sunlight and water and carbon dioxide, making simple sugars. Those simple sugars feed your plant, feed your soil microbiota. They help gather the energy for your crop. That's all part of what a whole farm system is. Grow legumes because you can harvest the nitrogen. Insectary plants, all of those things. Think about your farm as this crucible that has all of this energy in it, and how you figure out how you can harvest more of that. Add animals if you can, wherever possible, because we're finding they add a dimension to soil whole soil ecology, and then think about community and goodwill, because it's all about, the new system is all about interconnection and putting all of you together so that you're not competing with one another, you're complementing one another, and you're making the whole thing greater. So that's that section.
We're so different. That's what has made the success of our farm. I really believe that to be so true. So the third idea that we wanted to share with you that we feel has been the success of our farm is grow what you love. I mean, farming is a lot of freaking work, and you have to love and be passionate about the things that you're growing. Our problem is that we love everything, and so we're now at about 100 different crops that we grow. But Paul and I had this little motto when we first started farming was, we had 4 kids, and I really wanted to have fresh milk for the kids. I hated buying store-bought milk, so we had this expression, you just have to get the cow. And that has actually been a motto for our whole farming. You know, you can read about cows and you can go on the internet and find out, but really you just have to get it and try. And so we got a milk cow when the kids were little, and we've had now a milk cow for 30 years, and we provide all the fresh milk for our whole community. So pretty cool. And but really what we wanted to say in this is that you have to love what you're doing. And so for instance, I really love growing flowers, but again, it started with, you know, a little garden about this big, and I would take a few bouquets to the market, and then Paul was like, well, why don't you plant a few more? And so now we're up to 15 acres of organically cut flowers, fresh cut flowers that we sell through our CSA to stores and all over the Bay Area. And I still love every minute of growing flowers. It's the most beautiful thing, and I think it fits really well into what Paul was saying, that adding that diversity and beauty to your farm is so important. The sheep were another great example. So when I was, in 1984, 1 year after we started, Paul's brother gave me a lamb for Christmas because I was a spinner and a weaver, and I really wanted to have some sheep. So now we have 250 sheep on the farm, and one of the reasons we're a little bleary this morning is that we're in the middle of lambing, which does anyone raise sheep here? Yeah, lambing season is 1 month of pretty much 24 hours a day. So this is how our farm has grown. From our passion, from a little bit of just craziness, honestly. But it's also been so cool for the next generation. This is our son, Rai. He had a passion for chickens. And we always had a few for our family, but he started as a FFA member. His student project was raising chickens, and we now have about 1,500 laying hens, and we sell eggs at the farmer's market. They sell out by 9:30 in an hour every market. They're something we could keep going at, and he has designed all these coops, and it's just been a really wonderfully also an organic way to get the farm a new energy. This is our daughter Hannah, who brought to the she came back and is now a floral designer and takes all the flowers that I grow and makes a lot of money on them. I used to sell them for $7 a bunch, and she'll do a bridal bouquet with pretty much the same flowers and do $200 a bunch. So she has brought back to the farm this whole art. It's just so cool how she looks at the farm and what we're doing in a totally totally different way than we did as the first generation. This is our son Ammon and his wife. They wanted to be cooks. And so a farm can be anything, you guys. It can be, it doesn't have to be growing row crops. So he said, let's build a kitchen. So we built this beautiful certified kitchen, and now they do farm dinners and do value added, all these things that when I was a young farmer wanting to put up, tomato sauce but never had time, they're doing all that now and produce, hundreds of cases of jams and jellies. So it's sort of thinking outside the normal box. Our partner Andrew is a really avid, passionate tomato grower and started growing heirloom tomatoes and saves all of our own seeds and has even developed some of full belly varieties. And so, it's that love for what you're doing and making that part of your life. And my husband, Paul, has a love for growing soil. And you want to talk about that?
And I'm beginning to think maybe
Not too long.
not too long. There's a syndrome called lamb-addled, like when you're addle-brained, but it's hit this season. And so there's some things she didn't remember. She said that I came to her about planting more flowers. I think it wasn't that way at all. She said we're going to plant more flowers, and that's so we have a lot more flowers. And that's just the way it works. But I kind of got a little bit into this whole notion of this soil ecology, okay? Something else organic agriculture got right at the beginning was you have to keep your ground covered. You got to harvest as much sunlight as you can, and you do that with growing crops. Growing green plants harvest sunlight. I think this is one of the more exciting times I feel that we're in right now, beginning to think about soil and soil ecology, because it's being put in a context where we're connecting the problem, atmospheric carbon, or carbon in our bodies, or carbon in the ecosystem, and how fossil carbon is being burned, and how we have to begin to think about a pathway of putting it back in the ground. Organic agriculture has always thought that healthy soil, healthy plants, and healthy human beings are all connected, right? It's just the way the world works, and it's been that way for a long time. We may think we're smart enough to change it and create a virtual world where we don't need this, but in fact, this will be necessary 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now. It's not rocket science. So, but how we harness this is really important. And I can't talk for too long here, but growing plants, again, take sunlight, make it sugars, put it in the soil, and what we're discovering is that the microbial networks down there are the foragers. They have a symbiotic relationship with the plants. They're connected to plant roots. The plant is telling the this symbiosis, the soil microbiome down there, what it needs. They go look for it. We're finding farmers who can reduce their fertilizer inputs incredibly because they're harnessing the power of what's underneath our feet. It's a system that agriculture all but forgot. And the agriculture I grew up in all but forgot. But now we're reconnecting a whole, and again, this whole systems thinking. We say, well, we've always known that. But in fact, we're learning a lot more about this system and the liquid carbon pathway that happens from sunlight and sugars going into the soil. And now the question is, how do we keep it there? And how do we minimize disturbance? So we have been farming and creating naked soil. I think our journey is now, how do we grow good quality vegetables? How do we manage all the system where we're disturbing less? We're still going to disturb. So we have ongoing experiments this year with areas, diversity of cover crops, trying new combinations. We're going to roll some cover crops down. We're going to try and manage cover crops. We're creating a body of tools to maybe keep those cover crops pushed down while the plant is growing. But we want to grow as much as a carbon as we can in place. The above ground carbon is only 2/3 of what's there in this whole ecosystem. It's the root systems that are really critical. The above ground carbon And if you mow it really tight, you're not gaining as much solar power, right? So you need to have plants that at times, maybe in your cover crops, grow tall because they have more surface to pull more of that atmospheric carbon in a liquid carbon pathway down into the soil. There's a tremendous amount of good knowledge. Dr. Christine Jones from Australia, you can see her YouTube videos. There's now Midwestern farmers who are way out ahead of organic farmers and thinking about diverse mixes of cover crop. You discover that when there's, and the evidence is coming in, that when you have more than 8 species in your cover crop mix, and we thought for years we were doing great. We had, our summer cover mix was Sudan grass, cowpeas, and buckwheat. Each one had a piece. We had a legume, we had a grass, we had a flowering plant for beneficials. We thought that was pretty hunky-dory. This last year we put another 5 things in that mix, sunflowers and different kinds of beans and other things in that mix to diversify it. Because what's happening in the soil is that you have these plant roots communicating with one another. When you have single species, or even 2 species, or 3 species, it's not nearly as effective as having 8 or 10, and there's growers now doing 25-way mixes. Because what happens in that diverse ecology is a little bit what Donegal talked about, that you have a system that happens underground that we're not paying attention to, but it communicates. And each one of those species draws a little different piece into the whole, and it makes the whole more dynamic and more complete. That's the new knowledge. Okay, that's the new, and organic farmers have been picking around those edges, but the knowledge is coming in that is actually verifying that diversity is a real key. So we try to grow soil, and so soil's a living system. Think about it that way. Think about how you bring those through living roots. You have to have living roots in the soil as much as possible. You have to have green plants as much as possible. You have to minimize your tillage and disturbance. So think about that one. Singing Frog Farms is doing it. You had them here last year. They're doing some great work that way. The Market Gardener, if you're a smaller grower, has great answers there about how you minimize tillage. So we have new working models to make this all easier. When we started 40 years ago, there was no roadmap. There are much better roadmaps, and there are much better products out there. The hard thing is sorting through them all and figuring out which one fits for you and which one you're going to try this year. But as you sink your roots deep, you are learning, we are learning, and if we learn as a community, we're going to get there a lot faster. We're learning about this soil dynamics underneath our feet, and we're getting much closer to making it a really healthy system.
Okay. So we are doing a workshop later, so we'll have questions and answers then. But one of the things for me, I wanted to put this out as a principle or a little tip of wisdom is that I'm a really big believer in karma, that the more you give, the more that comes back to you. And as farmers, we can no longer just be farmers. We have to be educators. We have to be the ones that are bringing people back to the farm, because this new generation has been so removed from farming. And so one of our things from the get-go as farming at Full Belly Farm is that we have to be the educators. We have to be giving more than just broccoli in a box. We have to be the ones that are teaching the next generation. So one of the things we've done from the very beginning of our farm is have apprenticeship program. We have 5 apprentices every year that spend a whole year with us. They live, they work, they do everything with us. And, for so many of them, it's been, it's just life-changing to touch a pig, to be part of a bigger system, to really get that life part. This is a group of interns that we had 3 or 4 years ago, and their lives have been forever changed by spending a year on the farm. Our goal, and over 30 years, we now have probably 100 farms around the country where people started with an apprenticeship at Full Belly Farm. And one of them is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There are exactly 6 organic farms in the certification program in Oklahoma, and they are one of them. So it's like very slowly making some change. We do hundreds of tours on our farm, and it's a labor of love. We rarely get paid for tours, but we just feel like we have to be doing this now. It's so vital for this whole continuity of farming to stay in our knowledge, our DNA base. I've had kids sit on my knee while milking a cow that have said, "Is this soy milk?" So, I mean, so disconnected, and we have to bring them to that udder. We have to, so that they understand that this is soft and warm, and this is where milk comes from. We have school groups. Again, this started as a little bit of organic thing. My first son was in 3rd grade, and the school that he went to wanted to have a farm that they could come and spend 2 or 3 nights on. And so we started that way with one school group, and now we do about 50 a year. They come, they spend 2 or 3 nights on the farm. They're sleeping on the floor of the orchard. They see the night sky. It's so cool. They milk the cows with us. So this is where we have to be doing this, and this has actually come to now we have a full-time director of education and outreach at our farm, and some of you might recognize Jordan. He went to this high school. He came to our farm through your FFA program, and he came as a camp counselor and worked his way up to being the director of our outreach and education. I just love this picture because it says so many things. These kids are just so excited. We now have some of our school groups and summer campers are now coming back and wanting to be apprentices. And we had a letter that said, "I want to get married at your farm because I came there as a 3rd grader and I've never forgotten how beautiful it was." So these are the really deep connections. We are always having people come to talk about soil with Paul. This is one of the things that we also just feel like Paul said, when people are at your farm, every farm dinner we do, we give them a farm tour first. And that food connects them on literally a biological level. The microbes from what they eat on our farm go into them forever. We've also had people that have been raised on our food and then have just such a deep connection. So this is, the kind of things that we're trying to do. That's our event center. We do so many community events. We had too many flowers in one of our flower fields, so we put up a U-pick and people could just come and pick as many flowers as they wanted because we were never going to get to them all. Oh dear. What did I do? Kalita talked about the hose down. We do a huge harvest festival at our farm every year, and we have a watermelon eating contest. We are going to be doing it this year, October 5th, so put it on your calendar. We get like 5,000 people. It's a huge party, but it's all about getting people to dance on our farm. We don't know what makes our food taste so good. It could be that people are dancing on our farm. So you just never know the serendipity. And Paul's gonna finish. I know we're gonna run a little bit over time, but he's gonna talk about bringing rural life back.
So it's really inspiring to hear what Sierra Harvest is doing, because Sierra Harvest is actually making these connections. And those connections have to be made in so many dimensions, right? We have to make land more affordable for new farmers. We have to help them get into the business because we need to multiply the population of people who are actually out here farming. We need to support the ones who are trying to figure out how to farm, connect them to markets. So over time, we've been the principal partners in the farm, and now my kids are involved in many more things, trying to reconstruct rural communities. because we need to throw a lifeline to rural communities again, where imagination's lacking, power's being concentrated, land is going into fewer and fewer hands, and we have to begin to think about how we do that differently. One of the things we started years ago was branding our valley. We have a wonderful agricultural valley. It has incredible soils. It has a lot of small parcels because it's a little bit hilly, so you can't get in there with a big tractor and disc for 500 mile that way and a mile that way and then a mile that way, and you can't do that there. So the fences haven't been knocked down. The places are still intact. There's small parcels there, and we've been able to think about rebuilding a community because the scale is actually smaller, built on the topography, just like here. So we thought we need to brand our valley. We need to, again, one of the things that has been damaged as we've disconnected rural communities is that there's been a lot of psychological harm done. There are a lot of farmers who are pretty hangdog about the future. Grew up with farm families where the father said, "You don't ever want to go into farming. You know, it's too much work. The system doesn't support you. You know, sell real estate." You know, that was what the advice of a lot of family peers, farmer peers, were giving to their sons in those days. So we have to kind of begin to re-identify place and begin to build on place and build a sense of pride in those places where we know that they can be creative and there can be more going on. So we developed a brand. Farmers in the valley used that brand. Out of this came Cape Valley Farm Shop. And instead of the motto was, instead of 50 farmers or with 50 trucks, we can do 50 farmers in one truck. They do a lot of the retail and wholesale connections, so farmers can aggregate at that place. So the Cape Valley Farm Shop is something that's a direct outcome of Cape Valley Grown. My son Ammon, and don't get us wrong, we're going to pay for a lot of years for this kitchen. Okay, it's not like we have a big wad of cash we're sitting on. We started. You want to go back to that picture, Drew? I married Drew because she had a steady job and a pickup. And I was able to use the pickup. She says I still owe her for the pickup, but she had resources, and boy, was she attractive that way. But this kitchen becomes a place where this is a pizza night. So pizza night on Friday nights now in the summertime when it's warm enough, we'll make pizzas here. The community can come, people bring their bottle of wine, they set out their tablecloths, and they can come to the farm. We have to get people to put their feet on your farm so that they get it, okay? This distance between reality and virtual reality and what people know and experience happens in a garden, and I think that's an incredible place to do it, but it also happens just bringing people out and showing them a different reality. So we've developed a map. We've worked with the Land Trust for years. We need new mechanisms for people to buy land and hold land and give security. It may not be ownership. It may be owned by a community, but we need new models there. We need to get people out and highlight some of the farms that are there. I've worked with the Land Trust for the last 35 years, mostly preserving agricultural land. We have a tasting of summer produce that I've been organizing the food for 30 years. You're basically allowing people to understand the diversity of the region they live in by bringing people in. So we're educating at all levels. Farmers need a tremendous amount of help to find new models that they can use to farm with. But everybody who supports the agricultural community now needs to be connected. And you connect through food and celebration and joy and possibilities. You bring them to the table and you share. So we have 30 restaurants that come and they cook all the Yolo County produce or prepare it. They do a wide array of dishes. It supports the Land Trust that then has now preserved about 15,000 acres of Yolo County farmland with permanent easements. True, we have a local, we're active locally. Drew is the president of the board of the Rumsey Improvement Association. I've been working with the Grange for years, trying to get our rural resources and trying to create a much larger community up in our area of people who recognize the possibilities that can happen there. Judith has worked with CAF and CalCan, California Climate and Action Networks. And so she's been active on both the regional and national stage, speaking and talking about integrated agricultural systems. CAF, Community Alliance with Family Farmers, has done a tremendous amount of good work. Judith was one-time executive director. Drew, as at one time, was executive director of Ecological Farming Association for 5 years. That ran out of some little room in our house there, and Drew kept that piece together. Judith is working now with CalCan and the Organic Farmers Association nationally, trying to bring a little bit more weight to what the farmers perceive as a healthy organic agricultural system and marketplace by organizing farmers. I don't know why this one got in there, but this is again, how the essence of what we're all trying to do is develop a sense of self-reliance. Develop some pride and integrity, because we know we can be a bit more independent of every aspects of our life. We're trying to balance that desire to be independent with the desire and the need to grow a community. So you're looking to enhance both. I feel really good when I know we have solar power on our buildings and we can create the energy we need to run our packing shed and run a lot of the electricity we use in that facility. We're trying to add more. We did an independent 35 kW system that is the total irrigation system for a new block of trees. Okay, so we're not grid tied. So we're looking for ways that we can see our investments will make us more independent, and a better model of resiliency and a better model of an agriculture that will last well into the future. So we're harnessing the power of the sun there. And so it's all about communicating what you're doing. It's all about creating larger community networks. It's all about thinking creatively, where each of you has a skill that you can add to a whole, and you combine that with activists in your community who are thinking food systems. You bring churches in. You start to begin to create a network of people who know that we have to make change. Climate change, as an example of what we need to address, will not change unless it becomes a community effort. It will not be done on the backs of farmers who are trying to figure it out. It will need to happen if it is really something where in 10 years from now we're looking at a degree and a half as an example. Whether you think it's right on, or it's a lot of hooey that's been foisted on us by a consensus of scientists, or near consensus. But if to solve those problems, we have to address them in different ways as networks of people connected. So our job, your job, is to connect more people to this idea that we are offering a solution for healthier food, for a healthier planet, and for a long-term resilience. So thanks. Got okay?
You guys are so awesome. I feel like crying. Are really inspiring. I don't know about you guys, but that kind of choked me up. The thought that we could really build that kind of community here. Wow, thank you so much, Drew and Paul. Thank you so much. All right, so I don't know if you noticed, but we got off schedule by 15 minutes, and here's what we decided to do. We think that you deserve a whole lunch, so we're going to push everything forward 15 minutes, and we're going to take it off the workshops. Is that good for you? Okay? Because when they started going there, I don't want you to stop, really. I want you to keep going. Okay, so this is a networking lunch where you get a chance to talk to everybody, and don't forget to do your passports. And where to go to pick up the lunch is to go down the hall past going into those rooms. It's like 2 more doors past the rooms that you go into the main hall. All right? And don't forget Sunday's roundup table sign-up is going to be there. And we'll see you in an hour. Thank you.